díobh ar fad agus fáilte romh go dtí seminar Ghaeltachta. We're really pleased that you've joined us, and we're very excited about the seminar and about the theme of this seminar in supporting students with autism in Irish medium and Gaeltacht schools. So this seminar is being conducted mostly in English as per your request, and mas spéisiúla héine gunneanach mud ceanna a chur ar fáil in Ghaeilge, táid bras as the sinna dhéana, ach díreach tagháil linn trí dulgadín Steve Grayson agus firm Alina a sin nó an spéis sin a churnúil and sin trí chlórú and sin. So today's seminar will be an hour and 15 minutes long, so slightly longer than usual, to reflect, I suppose, the wealth of knowledge and the panel that we have with us today, who are going to share a lot of practical support and guidance to you on this theme. So our chairperson is a person with expansive theoretical and practical expertise in working with children with autism in an Irish medium school. Mhaoilchiaráin is principal of Gaelscoil for many years now, and she has two special classes that are well renowned for their impressive practices and exemplary work. So we're very lucky to have Clodagh with us this evening, and Clodagh is also the chairperson of our Special Educational Needs Committee as part of Gaeltachta's Board of Directors. So before I hand over to Clodagh, I want to talk briefly about a new venture, a new collaboration with As I Am. I don't think As I Am as an organisation needs any introduction, but we've started a very positive project of collaboration with them, with a view to expanding resources and knowledge and supports for children with autism in Irish medium and Gaeltacht schools. So the first step in this collaboration is the making available of 22 resources in Irish, which we hope will help parents and teachers to help children and young people to reach their full potential in Irish medium or Gaeltacht setting. So these wonderful resources include sensory checklists, worksheets, booklets, posters, etc. There's also a passport, for example, for children that are transitioning from the levels, so from the Nínre to the Scoil. We have a lovely resource for that. And other resources that are suitable for children at the three different levels of Nínre, primary and post-primary schools, all run through the medium of Irish. So these resources are just the starting point for us, of us expanding our services for the many children that are in our Irish medium schools and Gaeltacht schools. So all of these resources are available to download from our website, and there will also be a link. I think they have just gone into the chat just there now. And you can access them there. So just to say, we're very grateful to As I Am for facilitating this collaboration and for being open to the opportunity. And in fact, they welcomed it very much, the opportunity to increase services and supports for children with autism in Irish medium schools. We're really thrilled about that, and this is just a starting point for us. So I'm sure we'll be back with more in the near future for you. So, gan a hill Mhuire, tá me chun ágáil in isfí Clodagh chun stúr a dhéanamh ar an seminar se. Clodagh.
And just to mention there, in relation to those resources, it's wonderful that, as we're all aware, that this is Autism Awareness Month. So we're delighted that to bring these resources to you during this month. And so Garmila Mahagadas of Chin. Marder Blonde, this Mission Mhaoilchiaráin, is Private May Air Gaelscoil Ballybregeen. My name is Mhaoilchiaráin and I'm the principal of the Gaelscoil in Balbriggan. We're delighted to bring this webinar to you this evening, especially for you as parents of children who may be due to start, or maybe you have questions in relation to the possibility of your child starting, or the suitability of the system for your children before they start, or maybe you have a child already in an Irish medium setting, and you may be interested, or you may have had specific questions, and we hope that this seminar will go some way to be able to maybe answer any questions that you may have. I would like to thank everybody who sent in questions over the last while. We have endeavoured to incorporate as many of the questions as possible into the presentations this evening. And if there are any left over at the end, then we will try to bring them back to the panel and try to get them finished if we have time. I would mention that the chat function is open. However, I wouldn't imagine that we will have time answer a huge amount of questions at the end of this evening's webinar. However, if you do have any specific questions that maybe weren't covered, or you'd like for further information in relation to them, please feel free to enter any information into the chat, and we will endeavour then to collate answers and be able to get back to you then. So I suppose Ghaeltachta Mhuire is more owner than panel Mhíchíl and the Choileáin. It's my great honour to introduce this evening's panel. Our first speaker is Carmel Airt. Carmel Airt has extensive experience in the Irish medium setting. She has been a principal and one of the founders of Gaelscoil Mhíchíl in Gaeltachta, County Cork. And this was one of the schools. This school was the first school to open an Irish medium ASD class in outside the Gaeltachta. So we're delighted to have her expertise here this evening. She's also a former member of the board of directors of Gaeltachas, and also is a former director and former chair of Luimneach, which is the patron body for Irish medium schools. She has also carried out her studies in relation to and focusing on the question, can Irish medium schools cater effectively for pupils with literacy difficulties as part of her master's, and she is now undertaking a PhD zeroing in on the ethnographic comparative study on the achievements of pupils with moderate ability in English and Irish medium schools. We're very excited to see her future results coming out on that. So Shinny Carmel. After that, then Celine Rónáin, who is a parent of 2 children with autism. She's 15 years of experience dealing with autism at home, and has 5 years experience working as a special needs assistant in Scoil. I'm honoured to have Celine as one of our our fantastic SNAs. She go Berlin in Gaelscoil, and she works in our ASD unit. All of our students have attended our school, and Fionn, her oldest child, was the first person in our school with autism, and he, I suppose, began the journey for us in our school of learning, and it's been a fantastic boher that we've all been on together. So she will talk about her experience as a parent of children with autism and who are going through their educational system through the medium of Irish. After that, then we will have Brenda Mhaoilchiaráin, and Brenda Mhaoilchiaráin tá so caithí na Gaeltachta agus na Gaelscoil so Brenda, Brenda is primary school teacher and Mhuire. She's over in Mhuire in Carmel in County Galway. However, before returning to Carna, she spent 5 years teaching the Gaelscoil in County Offaly, so Gaelscoil there and Shin. The school opened its first class for children with autism in 2017, and Brenda has spent 2 years working there. She's returned home to Máire last year, where she has experience of working with children with autism in a Gaeltacht school setting also. She's currently carrying out her research as part of the MEd programme in Irish medium and Gaeltacht settings in Mary, and she's writing her thesis on autism in immersion setting, focusing in on PECS, a system of communication. So again, a lot of practical and theoretical knowledge there as well. And then our final pointer is Máire Cronin from Gaelscoil Choileáin. She's a primary school teacher, and she works as a special educational needs coordinator in the school. She spent several years teaching various different classes before moving into learning support and resource in 2003, and she's been directing and organising the support programme since then. And they have 4 or 5 classes, making to four classes for children with autism as well. So again, has a huge amount of professional experience working with these children. So Ghaeltachta Mhuire, while I'm here, Carmel later, unmuting in Mhuire agus Canary Fermila Mahbeth.
Clóda. So Tosnoig me Martin and Dee Recorda. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm just going to fly through this. Just to give you a bit of background information, I've been involved in a Gaelscoil teaching through the medium of Irish since 1994, and I finally resigned my position as opposed to retired in 2017. Prior to that, I'd been working in English medium schools. And in the context of children with additional learning needs, which I prefer is the term I prefer to use. For the first 4 years, we functioned without any form of of support. And in 1999, we were delighted to get our first shared learning support teacher. 2001, a resource teacher was appointed under a government scheme to cater for pupils with low incidence learning disabilities, which would at that time have included ASD. Nothing really happened other than the numbers grew on the numbers of children with needs until 2010, when the department approached us and asked us to take on a unit, which we did. And that's what I'm going to talk about. So 2011, our first class, we had 3 boys. And 2017, when I left, there was an early intervention, a junior class and a senior class. And right now there's an extension going on to cater for 5 classes. So that's where the school is at the moment. And that's my background. So I suppose the most important thing is to look at where you are as parents. And I want you, if you could, to put one thing at the center of everything you're going to hear this evening. The only thing that's important here is your child, where your child is and where you are with your child. And your child is your child. Your child is, I have great difficulty with people saying, oh, it's an autistic child. It's a child first and foremost, and it's a child who has been diagnosed as having a condition, and that condition happens to be autism. But the most important thing is that what we're talking about here tonight are people, small people, little people with additional needs. So what were the greatest assets when I started out? Well, we had 3 great boys. Some days I didn't think they were so great, but they were great. The most important thing for me was that I had the whole staff buy in, all the staff bought into the school. And I'm telling you this because I feel that the title of tonight's webinar is tacú, and that is on the understanding that you're already there. But I want to take a step back and see what gets people to this point, that they give us the 3 boys, that the staff are buying into it. What brings parents to the decision to send children to a Gaelscoil, or how do you make that decision? So these were the greatest assets I had, and they will be important as we go on. I had a staff that were dedicated to best practice. There was no stone they wouldn't turn over to find out another way of doing things, a better way of doing things when things didn't work out. The other thing we had was cooperation and support among colleagues. And again, I can't stress that enough. And then from the parent side, we had parents who were willing to trust the school. They were willing to trust us. And they were also willing to accept when we put our hands up and said, look, this is not working. We've tried this. This was suggested. We have to try something else. And they still trusted us. And I think that's very important as well. And that came as a result of parents working in partnership with us. And that partnership extended to the individualized education programs, where they were with us all the time in devising those. And we had team members willing to upskill and engage in continual professional development. And one of them is here with us. That's Máire. Máire was going to speak with you later. Máire was the person who really put her shoulder to the wheel when we started and gathered the information and brought the staff together and brought the school to where it is today. So what were the challenges we had? And these are the challenges that we had as a school, and they're the challenges that parents have. We had, and I'm putting it mildly when I say, strong opposition from speech and language therapists and from psychologists who were involved with the children. They couldn't have been stronger in their opposition. There was resistance from the local service provider, and it was active resistance as well. There were explicit recommendations made to parents not to send their children with a diagnosis to a unit within a Gaelscoil. And that resulted in a whole group of confused, worried and anxious parents. And those parents who have children with that diagnosis are confused and are worried and are anxious anyway. And this added to their confusion and their worry. And the other problem that we encountered as we went along was the lack of appropriate supports from the outside agencies. So that's where we started. So let's look at you now. And I'm just going to presume that there are people here and they have a child, and the child is going through an assessment process at the moment, or has come out the other end of an assessment process, and the child has come with a diagnosis. And now the question of taking your child, your little girl or your little boy, by the hand and taking them to school, which is every parent's dream. It's a bigger question in the case of a child who has an additional learning need. And unfortunately, these people who sit around tables, the multidisciplinary team, they all come with their own baggage and they all come with their own experiences. And of course, the majority of them have no idea whatsoever what happens in a Gaelscoil, other than they believe that we teach Irish all day long. The understanding and the realization that it's just a way of being is far removed from people who are on the outside looking in. So of course it's understandable that they will say absolutely not, you can't send your child there because communication is a big problem for your child. They're going to be communicating in Irish. But what they're actually overlooking is that communication takes many forms. It isn't just the oral language. And I would have to say, and Máire will tell you more about this, that quite a large percentage of the children we have had and still have are non-verbal. They have neither Irish nor English. They have an understanding of both, but they don't express themselves in either one or other. So that's another thing that needs to be borne in mind. So you have met with your multidisciplinary team if you're at this point. You've met with the speech and language therapist, you've met with the OT, the psychologist, and probably the community nurse, if you're lucky. And at the centre of all of this is your child, your little boy and your little girl. And all these decisions are going on. What school will you send your child to? And will you send your child to the local, beautiful, shiny, brand new English medium school? Or will you send them to the small country school where there are less numbers and the teacher might have greater time to look after your child or to give the child the care that the child needs and deserves? Or what if you're living in the Gaeltacht and you have no choice? You have to go to the local school and it's a Gaeltacht school. Or woe betide that you might have considered a Gaelscoil for your child. So there's a myriad of questions that you need to look at. And when you start saying, I'm thinking of sending my child to the Gaelscoil, this is the normal response. Are you mad? Why would you? So, you know, are you really serious in thinking of doing something like this? And what it results in then is you as a parent sitting at home, absolutely beside yourself with worry. So I'm hoping that maybe if we go through this, I might be able to help you to see what school or how you decide what school is the best fit for your child. You will have people who will tell you that your child won't cope. But what's different from one school to the next? Every school in the country operates under the same regulations. Every school in this country has the same structures. They have junior infants up to 6th class. They have a principal, they have staff, they have a SENCO, a special educational needs coordinator. They have learning support teacher. They have the same supports available to them. Now, granted, supports vary from one area of the country to another, not from one school to the other. But again, central to all of this, your child is the same child facing this barricade, which is what it is. So let's look at the provision that are made for special aid in Ireland. And unfortunately, you know, we have had 25 different pieces of legislation and circulars from the Department of Education guiding the practice that's currently in place in primary schools and second level schools. 25 separate pieces of legislation. And if you look back, nothing happened before 1993. So in actual fact, when you think about it, it's not a long time ago since the foundations for special ed were laid down in this country. It wasn't happening before in any type, either Irish medium or English medium schools. And unfortunately, sorry, I've gone too far too fast. The reaction has been, sorry, I'm going way too fast now. It has always been reactive. We've been inclined to react. And what we've reacted to were court cases, the most famous of all being the Cathy Sinnott case. Prior to that, 1993, the one that really kicked the ball into the playing pitch was the O'Donoghue case. And as a result, the department have reacted. And if you look here, the history of special aid in this country has always been, as Brenda himself said, a very cautious, pragmatic one, which tried to balance economic consideration with educational principles. But central to it always were economic considerations. So let's see, is this going to move on for me? It is. And to add to that, in the area of Irish medium schools, even though there was a differentiated policy and it positively disposed towards the provision of uathachas immersion education, there was little or no recognition ever given to the case of learners with additional needs in the CFT, the Scoil lán-Ghaeilge and the Scoil Ghaeltachta. So while we did at one point begin to support Ghaeltachas and Irish medium education, that happened, but the support for children with additional needs in those type of situations wasn't forthcoming at the same time as it was in English medium schools. And that maybe led us to where we are now, that those questions still come up. However, in the Stratéis Náisiúnta Conan Literacht agus Nifreachtaí, so the improvement of literacy and numeracy strategy, it was for the first time recognised that children in Irish medium schools had needs that were very different from learners in schools that were not operating through the medium of Irish. And these were children even without learning needs. So it was recognised that they had a different way of learning. So what it amounted to was that we kept going round in circles. So have a look at where we are since 2019. So while we say we've had all these acts and we've had all these circulars, 2019, we're back to where we started again. Because we have a circular which says, in the case of pupils with significant and sustained learning difficulties, an exemption from the study of Irish, I've put that in for clarification, an exemption may be considered where they have at least reached second class in primary school. So the problem now, Accorda, is that we're being shown that Irish, by the authorities, is a burden on children. And it's my contention that that's not the case. Because, and it ties in with this theory known as the deficit approach that has been around for quite some time. And the deficit approach considers the use of any language other than English confusing for the learner and of less value than English. And if you think about that, how insulting is that to people who live in Airt-na-Ghaeltachta, County Ghaeltachta, and how insulting it is to those parents who choose to send their children to an Irish medium school. Because it's not confusing for the learner and it is not of less value than English. So when we go back and look at special ed again, these are the categories of special ed that the Department of Education itself recognised as far back as 1999. And it was on the basis of that circular 899 that supports were provided. And you will see the one that's concerning us this evening was way down the list. It was the 7th, children who presented with autism. And it was there, and there was provision made for it since 1999. We got our first allocation in 2001. So when we talk about autism, and I'm sure those of you who have a child who has now been diagnosed or who's going through the process, you have heard of the Triad of Impairment. So when we talk about a child with autism, we're talking about a child who has social communication difficulties, a child who finds it difficult to communicate, either verbally or non-verbally, in social settings. It's not just language, it's a lot more than language. And I think that's possibly where we're all getting bogged down. A child with a diagnosis of autism also has or presents with rigidity of thinking. They're not as flexible in their thinking as another child might be. And also they will present at times with difficulties interacting socially. They may not be as able to make friends as others. They may not be able to understand the cues that happen when people are talking. They may not be able to even decipher what's being said sometimes because they have a very literal take on language, and that impacts on their social interaction. So the typical child who has a diagnosis of autism presents with these 3 characteristics to some extent. And of course, the thing we must always remember is that a child who is diagnosed with autism is anywhere on the spectrum. In fact, I would contend that we're all on the spectrum somewhere. So why are more questions raised about those children when a parent considers a TDO setting for their child? And I think that the reason that those questions are asked of parents like you is for 2 reasons. Number one, the deficit approach, because English is superior to everything else. And secondly, social communication is seen as language only. So if we can get past that, if we can get past the fact that children can communicate in ways other than standing up in a bandbox and giving speeches or being the life and soul of the party and dancing on top of tables, because not every child, even children who don't have a diagnosis, will not fall into those categories, then maybe we're at the starting block when we start considering what school is the best fit for our child, the child that has that need, for whom you need to be more protective than you would in the normal course of events. So which school best fits my child? How do I decide where to send my child? Will I send my child to the local English medium school, or will I send my child to the local Gaelscoil? So how do we make those decisions? And it would be my contention that those decisions are based on the effectiveness of the provision that's made within the schools for the children as they present. So again, going back to the National Strategy for Literacy and Numeracy, they have clearly stated, and it's clearly stated in that strategy, that for success, effective school interventions are needed to manage the learning outcomes of pupils, irrespective of what their needs are. So number one, when you're making a decision, you need to be sure that the school you're sending your child to does provide effective, and I haven't put that in bold print for nothing, effective school interventions. And the second most important consideration is that whatever school that you approach to enroll your child has a targeted curriculum, a curriculum that's suited to the needs of the individual child, not making the individual suitable to the curriculum, but making the curriculum suitable to the individual needs of your child. Because again, if your child is a child who's not speaking, there's little point in sending your child to a school where there's going to be huge emphasis on recitation and poems every morning, and which are hugely valuable for language development, but it's not going to be much good to your child. So you need a targeted curriculum. So they're the first two questions you need to ask. What are the interventions that your school, the school you're considering, is providing to manage the learning outcomes for your child? What is the school going to do? What will they actually do day to day? And Máire is going to talk about some of those things later. And the curriculum, what curriculum? And you'll hear about the modified curriculum and the changes that are made to a curriculum to suit the needs of the children. So according to the department itself, it has 4 different toscary, I don't know the English word for it. They have 4 different measures of what good practice is. The first one is, and again, this is a question you need to ask your school, that there is an inclusive and comprehensive special ed policy in the school. And if you're trying to make a decision, I'd suggest you ask for that and you read it and read it carefully. That also, that there is time and effort given to the development of individualized work programs for every single child with a special need, because every need is personal to that particular child. That there is cooperation, and I can't stress that enough, that there is cooperation among the staff, the service providers and the parents in the provision of supports to the child with a special need. And that in the case of a child who's in the mainstream class, that there is clear evidence that there is a differentiated program in practice in the mainstream classes. Because sometimes the mainstream class can be even more challenging than the unit, because differentiation means different things to different people. So what are the best practice indicators? There they are in English: the differentiated program, the cooperative approach, the individualized program, and the comprehensive school policy for special education provision. Now, in a piece of research that I did, I looked at the priorities on the learning support programs, and I was comparing SLG, Scoil na lán-Ghaeilge, and Scoil na Mán and Mhuire. And if you look down through them, I actually can't see it now on my screen at the moment, but uathachas, schools, Scoil na lán-Ghaeilge, 38% of all Irish schools focused on uathachas, fluency in language. 46% of them focused on the understanding of language and had clear specific programs aimed at developing fluency and comprehension. Compare that with what's on the English medium schools, and this was in a survey of 80 schools nationwide. Schools, all Irish schools, sorry, you will look at the other two, phonetic awareness, and I can't see the bottom one, so I don't know what it is. So in actual fact, you'll be able to look at them yourselves. What does effective provision depend on? It depends on the quality and the standard of the interventions, the quality and the standard of the school procedures. What are the procedures in place to deal with your children? It's dependent on inclusive school policies, targeted individualized interventions, staff cooperation and shared understanding, and in-class differentiated approaches. That was the second result of the research that was done in 80 national schools nationwide, 40 English medium and 40 Irish medium. So what are the indicators? Again, as I told you, the indicators, the toscarí, that there are teaching methods and support programs that cater directly and specifically for the development of the abilities, the linguistic abilities of the children. And it makes no difference whether that's in Irish or in English, but that is an indicator of effective provision. That teachers understand and have a facility with lán-Ghaeilge, how children acquire language, how they learn language, that the staff have a knowledge and an understanding of the process of the acquisition of language, that there is a whole school agreed and shared and understood education, special education policy. And when it comes to those other things, tásálacha, caighdeánacha, standardized tests, they apply to the regular classes. But where your child is concerned, you need to know that there are teaching methods and programs that are going to cater for the specific need of your child, and that the teachers in that school are knowledgeable and have a background in linguistics and how children acquire language, because that is what we're talking about when we say linguistics. And that every teacher in the school, not just the Múinteoir Móras and not just the Múinteoir Clódas, that every teacher in the school understands what's in the learning support policy and that it's agreed. So which school setting do you want for your child? I'll tell you how you decide. You look at the strategies. You look at the whole school vision. What's the vision of the school? What are the approaches they're using? And what's the ethos of the school? And all of that will show you and will indicate to you the dedication that the school will have towards your child with a special need. You will notice the word language isn't used there. English isn't used there. Irish isn't used there, because language is secondary to all of those things. So when you go to decide or attempt to come to a decision, these are the main avenues that you need to explore. What's the ethos of the school with regard to the child with a special need? What strategies are they using for my child, whether my child has Down syndrome, or my child has a literacy difficulty, or my child has ASD? So there we are. Tá na Slough an, and there's an explanation with them, and tá mé réig míle buchas.
Míle míle maith agad a Carmel, bhí sin haar cín ar fad. Thank you so much for that. It was so much knowledge in that. It was absolutely fantastic. Míle maith agad. Irimanish Celine Rónáin, Tish Mahor Lairtling. I'd now ask Celine, who's a parent of children with autism, to come. Come on, that's Celine.
Hi, Dave, Ghaeltachta. Fionn, my eldest child, was in Mhuire when he was diagnosed with autism, and we had chosen a Gaelscoil for his education really before he was born. So obviously we'd no idea that he had autism when we were choosing it. So we pretty much chose a Gaelscoil for the same reason as anybody else does. My older sister's children had been educated through Irish, and I suppose I marvelled at them when I watched them speak as Gaeilge to their friends, because they were so fluent, they were so comfortable with the language, and they had such a respect for the language, which was totally at odds with my own experience of Irish in school. After 14 years of learning it, I certainly didn't leave with a gra for the language. And sometimes, you know, it felt that I left with not much more than an Mhaoilchiaráin dulgadí an letters, to tell you the truth. So, you know, I wanted something different, or we wanted something different for our children. You know, my sister's kids did ignite a love of the language in me, but to be perfectly honest, my reasons for the Gaelscoil were much more pragmatic than that. To me, you know, if Irish was on the curriculum, then after 14 years of studying it, they should be fluent, you know. So obviously the best way to do that, or the best way to learn it, would be to be immersed in it. That was before a diagnosis of autism turned everything upside down. So we'd been concerned about Fion's speech for a while, and we took the bull by the horns and we went private to get a speech and language assessment. And we left that appointment with a diagnosis of a severe speech delay and a referral for the assessment of needs, because there were some red flags for autism. We were floored. It was completely out of the blue for us. Because he was our first child, I suppose we'd nobody to compare him with. So to us, the meltdowns he'd been having were the terrible twos, and which became the terrible threes. You know, his fussiness with food and smells was just, he's a fussy eater. So it really did come out of the blue for us. We were lucky in that where we lived, the services were actually quite good at the time, and he was picked up quite quickly by a multidisciplinary team. And we clung to their every word because we were so clueless. Our only experience of autism till then was like the film Rain Man. The very first thing that they said to us was, forget about a Gaelscoil. Once they heard he was in the Nínra, which is like the play school part, they said, forget about a Gaelscoil. That is just not an option. And I went home for that meeting and I put his name down for the English medium school next door that very day and forgot about the Gaelscoil. But we did draw the line at taking him out of the Nínra, which was suggested, because he was very happy, he was very settled there, and it just didn't make sense to pull him out in the middle of the year. So they started therapy with Fionn straight away with a view to assessing him at the end of the year for autism. So they started with speech and language therapy and occupational therapy. And we also worked very hard on the speech and language. We kept up with the private therapy too. And he progressed very, very quickly with the speech and language, so much so that just before he was due to be assessed for autism, the speech and language therapist told us that she reckoned he would be scoring within normal ranges for his speech and language. And true to form, he was diagnosed with autism, Asperger's in particular, on his 4th birthday. And as she predicted, he was scoring within normal ranges for his speech and language. And it was only at that point that myself and my husband kind of stopped and thought, okay, maybe we have different options here then, because they had said he couldn't proceed because of the speech and language difficulty. But if that wasn't there, then surely there wouldn't be a problem. We already knew that he was very happy in the Nínra. We'd seen great improvements in his behaviour and especially in his social skills, which was brilliant. He'd actually made a couple of friends, which was huge to us. So we knew that he was very happy there. Also, the Nínra, the teacher in the Nínra, was very proactive about keeping in touch with us and updating us on his progress, which was fantastic. But at the same time, we were very worried about how would he cope with this additional language. You know, are we putting him under even more pressure? And like, you know, autism is like brings enough challenges on its own. So we were very worried about that. And we spoke to the teacher in the Nínra about this. And she invited us into the class herself to observe him. And, you know, we could see from that. And once I saw him, you know, he very clearly understood all the instructions that he was being given. He had the same amount of words as anybody else in the class. He was very happy. He was very settled. He had friends, which was huge. You know, so at this stage as well, we'd really done our research. You know, we were really starting to learn about autism, and we knew that change can be a huge thing to some of these kids. So we were looking at him being in a Nínra, which at the time was actually located in the Gaelscoil. So he would be moving from one classroom to pretty much another classroom that looked the same, with the same people, everything totally familiar. Or we would be ripping him out of that and putting him into a school that he'd never seen before, with people that he'd never seen before. So it really just came down to, you know, we needed very clear reasons not to proceed to the Gaelscoil. And to be honest, we didn't get them. You know, well, he still has autism wasn't a good enough reason for us to tear him out of everything that he knew when he wasn't showing any problems with the language. So he did go on. That's September. He did start in the Gaelscoil, and they were amazing. From the moment that we said that, you know, we were interested in continuing, they were 100% on board. We were so nervous as parents because he was the first child with autism in the school. You know, there wasn't another child, there wasn't a precedent there to say to us, you know, you're not crazy. No, you're not ruining your son's whole life doing this. There was nothing. We really were out on a limb. We didn't have much Irish ourselves. It wasn't as if we were Gaelgory, you know, and speaking the language at home. And we worried, God, if he was struggling, would we be able to help him then? Will we be even able to manage the homework? It was all new for Clodagh and her team as well. And as I said, it was 100% buy-in. You know, they went about securing an SNA straight away, and they got one. Every SNA and every teacher that he ever had made it their business to learn about autism, and not just to educate themselves about autism, but to educate themselves about Fionn too. You know, so they knew his triggers, they knew what motivated him, they knew all about Fionn. They invited people from As I Am in to speak to the whole school about autism awareness. They changed a spare room in the school into a sensory room to help them. And then when other children were gradually diagnosed with autism, they were one of the first schools in the country to open an autism class or unit. So they had a very open door policy. They were very open to ideas, and they were very honest. And in the evening, they also ran basic Irish classes for parents, which were brilliant because we could go to those and start, you know, picking it up. I was surprised how quickly the school Irish actually did come back to us. And like, there was no need to worry about not having the Irish at home, because the homework in the first few years is so simple. Like it really isn't a problem. And then with the classes that we did, as it got harder, we were well able. And even if we hadn't done the classes, there were just so many supports out there available to us, and there's even more supports available now. I'm not saying it was plain sailing. It wasn't. I mean, at the end of the day, Fionn still had autism and all the challenges that brings to a young lad with an awful lot of sensory needs. And I know, like, every hurdle that we hit, my first question was always, oh my God, is this something to do with the language? And to be honest, if it was a problem with the language, he would have been straight out of there, because, you know, what was best for Fionn was what I wanted. So, but it never was. You know, he never had a problem with the language, and he just carried on. The challenges that we had were the things that kind of come part and parcel with autism, I suppose. So it was the crowded corridors and the smells and the noises. So when eventually other children were diagnosed and the school opened up an autism class, Fionn joined that class and he loved it. He was so happy there. It was called the Cuan, the harbour. And I thought it was such an apt name, because it became his safe harbour to strike out from, you know, when he felt able, and to retreat back into when he needed that little bit of extra help. There was a very strong, and still is, very strong ethos in the school of inclusion. So Fionn attended mainstream classes when he was able, and then he would get the one-on-one help then back in the Cuan. when it was needed. I knew how lucky we were. You know, I've friends in the autism community, and, you know, we would regularly talk about schools and how welcoming or not they are to children with autism. I knew from them we'd have conversations about, you know, an upcoming IEP meeting. And they would be saying to me stuff like, oh God, Celine, I'm dreading it. I just don't have the fight left in me this time. And I was always stumped because, first of all, the IEP meeting was just one of many meetings that we'd have. We regularly met with his teachers throughout the year, you know, to be kept updated on his progress. And to me, the IEP meeting was very simply an opportunity to see where Fionn is, where we want him to be, and how are we going to get him there. And it was as simple as that. You know, autism can be a very lonely journey, but one thing that we never felt with that school was alone. They were Team Fionn. And when my younger son then was diagnosed with autism, age 8, they became Team Callum too. My experience with the Gaelscoil had such a lasting impression on me that when Callum started school and it was time for me to go back to work, I decided not to go back to my career as a training consultant, and I decided to actually retrain as an SNA. I worked in a local school for a few years, and I really got to work studying Irish at night. And when a position came up in the Gaelscoil, I applied and I got it. And I remember at the time when Clodagh rang me to say that I'd been successful, I told her that it was my dream job. And I remember afterwards thinking to myself, oh God, I wonder, does she think I have very low expectations, because it's one of the lowest paid jobs that you could possibly find. But for me, it was never about the money. You know, I had seen firsthand the difference that a good school can make in the life of a child, and as a result in the life of his family. And I felt so privileged to be part of that team and in a position to make that same difference. I'm extra privileged to work in, there's now 2 autism classes in the school, and I work in the class with the younger children with autism, and I feel so privileged to be able to do that. Obviously, every single child in the unit has autism, but every single child in that unit is different. They are completely different people. They have different strengths. They have different challenges. For some of them, they haven't found their voice yet, and they'll communicate to us using PECS, the Picture Exchange Programme. But we will communicate to them. We will speak to them in Irish, and they understand. They follow instructions. Others soak up the language like a sponge. They really do. And it really does go to show that, you know, that old saying that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. You cannot put these children in a box and say, oh, all of you cannot, or all of you can. They are all individuals. And I think that's very, very important. It's a very challenging job, but it's very, very rewarding. When you're working with a child who came to us with no language, you know, neither English or Irish, and you're playing with them, and the first time that they giggle, "Cos timple may," as you're playing, that is worth all of the money in the world. Thanks very much for listening.
Míle mágad Celine, we should do the hint ar fad, gur míle mágad. I'm sure everybody is enthralled to listen to that, as I was. Gur míle mágad. Irmanish Brenda tacos for Gornish. So Brenda, gur míle mágad.
Gur mágad Clodagh, agus tí Choileáin. I'm just checking that this is working. I can't get my... Sorry, now I'm just trying to get my slides up. Anyway, as I'm waiting, I'll introduce myself. I'm Brenda, and I've spent 7 years teaching. And in those 7 years, I've been in quite a few different settings. And I'll give a brief summary of where I've been and how I've come to where I am today and why I'm here. And I'll just start now in a minute. Sorry. Now, here we go. Okay, so as I said, I'm 7 years teaching, and I've experienced teaching in the Gaeltacht and in the Gaelscoil. I'm originally from the Gaeltacht, and I'm back here now at the moment. And when I started teaching, I was subbing in Connemara locally. And it was then that I first came, that I first met a school where I was dealing with children with special educational needs. And it was a special school in the area. And it was really one of my first experiences with autism. And it sort of sparked an interest in me at the time. Now, I didn't realize that I would become more interested in it. I just kind of wanted to get a touch of every school at the time when I was starting off. So then I went up and I got my first job in Gaelscoil up in Offaly in Edenderry. And I spent 5 years teaching there. And during my time there, the opportunity came up to teach in the special class, and it was for autism. And it was a newly opened special class, and it opened in 2017. And I know when it was first brought to us as a staff, I remember thinking, that would be a great opportunity for me. And, I really enjoyed it when I did a few days here and there. And, I said I might give it a go, maybe eventually, as I get a few more years experience behind me. And, I was lucky enough to be offered to go into the special class the first year it opened. And, I'm thinking back now, we only received sanctioning for the special class in the middle of August and to open in September. And I remember getting the call and thinking, I'm not ready for this. I haven't learned enough. I haven't done the courses and things. And you know what? We went for it, and we were very lucky to get a lot of training. The NCSC provided the whole staff with training, from teachers, SNAs, to the secretary, to the cleaning staff. Everybody got a background in autism, a training day. And then a special class teacher, I was lucky to get a lot of extra training, and I went to a lot of courses. Unfortunately, not all of them gave me much information about special classes through Irish. But as a whole staff, we figured it out, as we went along. We talked to other schools and other teachers from other Gaelscoil, and I ended up spending 2 years in the special class. And there was a lot of new learning there for me and for the school, and the class developed and it grew, and it continues to develop. I'm no longer there anymore, unfortunately, but we were really proud, of what we did, because we found we were thrown in, and we grew as the years went by, and we were very proud doing everything through Irish. We were proud ourselves, and the children themselves were quite proud that they were speaking Irish too. They understood that this was something special, that we were doing everything through Irish, and that was the ethos throughout the school. And then I spent 2 years in the special class, and then I transferred in as special education teacher, and I was still working with children with ASD, mostly working on social skills and social stories and like that. And then last year I moved home to Connemara. Now, unfortunately, I'm not in a class with a school with a special class at the moment, but I am working with some children. Now, at the same time, I'm doing my master's in lán-Ghaeilge Gaeltachta, and I'm writing my thesis on PECS and how PECS is being implemented in Irish schools throughout Ireland, and through Irish. So it's something that there isn't much information about yet, and we're finding out a lot about it. And like Celine was saying, PECS is communicating through pictures. And I suppose one of the best things in our settings is that pictures are universal. It doesn't matter if it's English or Irish, it has the same meaning. So it's clear across languages. So what I'm looking at is what the current practice is out there at the moment, how teachers are translating into PECs and how they're implementing it and so on. And that's, I'll move on to the next one there. So I'll look at the differences between Gaelscoil and Scoil na Gaeltachta, just because there might be some people from both, or maybe some people who are on the Immel, kind of in between. They could go to a Gaelscoil or they could go to a Scoil Gaeltachta, depending where they live. So in a Gaelscoil, Irish is usually, not always, but usually first experienced in school. Whereas in the Scoil na Gaeltachta, some children could or will have Irish before starting school. So it all depends their first experience with Irish. In Gaelscoil, Irish is usually not used in the community or at home, whereas in the Scoil na Gaeltachta, Irish is generally spoken in the community and at home. They're the main differences, really, and they're to do with outside of school. Within the school, children are fully immersed in the language in both. There are ASD classes in both settings, and there are supports for children with ASD through SCTs, SNAs, differentiation within classes, and so on. So there aren't too many differences, really. So a lot of the questions are, why would you choose? And we've touched on this. Why would you choose an Irish school? Now, I'd like to just point out as well, a lot of these are my observations and opinions, experiences. And these are some things that have stood out to me over the last few years, why you would send a child with ASD to an Irish medium school. Only some of. One of them is the cultural aspect of the Irish medium schools. And the Irish schools, they really do put a big emphasis on Irish heritage activities such as céilís, dancing, the GAA, Irish music, things like that. And it just opens up a wider range of opportunities to engage socially for the child. Some children might find they love the céilí dancing or so on. And it's just more opportunities that way. Now, the visual aspect, what I would say here is that if a child comes into school, into an Irish medium school, who's never heard or spoken a word of Irish before, whether they have a diagnosis of ASD or not, they're all in the same boat regarding the language. And when they come into junior infants, so much is taught through images, pictures, videos. It's hugely visual. And that really suits, I find, children with autism, because they tend to be, or they can be, visual learners. And this is just taken from a research made by Sinead McAndrew. And she found that Irish medium education can help with development of communication skills. And I just found that was very interesting. And from my own experience, children with ASD enjoy the fact that they can speak more than one language. They find it quite cool that they have another language than maybe some of their friends outside of school. And they find maybe that they're speaking code, if they want to be, and, they really actually enjoy it. Okay, I'll move on here. Here's a quote I found, and it's to do with other forms of special educational needs. And it says, a growing body of research is showing that bilingual education is a beneficial system of education for children with varying special educational needs, including children with autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and Down syndrome. Education through the medium of Irish in Ireland and other forms of bilingual education offer many advantages to children, including literacy and fluency in both languages. All right, gone too far ahead. So yeah. Greater confidence and sense of identity and cognitive and increased educational attainment. These advantages are available to all children, including those with special educational needs. So what I find there is, all children can access Irish medium education. And that's important to note. And I know a question or a few questions came in just regarding Down syndrome and Irish medium education. So I just want to share something small, that I don't have any professional experience with Down syndrome, but my younger sister has Down syndrome, and she attended the local Gaeltacht school that we all attended, my brothers and my sisters and I. And, she didn't have a great level of language going into that school. And I suppose we were kind of limited. Well, I wasn't involved in the decision at the time, but my parents were limited in that we were living an hour and a half from Galway City, and there weren't too many options for her as regards special schools at the time. So she was sent to the local primary school. And really, her language and her understanding of her spoken language, at the end of the day, that was only a huge part of that experience of her going to the primary school. Like, most importantly for us, and even now, is that she made local friends. She was invited to every single birthday party. She had all her class at all of her birthday parties. And, you know, she understands Irish. She doesn't speak much, but I think a lot of that is by choice, more so than being able to. But she still has those friends, even though they've gone on. She's 23 now. A lot of those kids would have gone on there in college, and we'd see them around locally. And they'll always, always be so nice to her. She remembers everybody, and like, they are friends for life. And I just wanted to make that point, that that's really important as well. If you are considering, if you're in the Gaeltacht, or if you're considering one of your local schools, you know, it is important to have local friends as well. That's just coming from our experience. Okay, I'll move on now to the evidence-based information. And this is just another quote that I found during my research. And it's that bilingualism does not obstruct language development in children with ASD. And it's clear and straight to the point. You know, it does not. Agus tá fianais an nachgudan an dáthangachas bach dreise orthu. So, you know, it's a really important point when you're trying to decide whether or not to send your child to the Gaelscoil or Scoil Ghaeltachta for that matter. Okay, I'm trying to move ahead one. Here we go. How can we support children with ASD in Irish medium schools? And when I was making up the slide, I suppose I wrote it out just thinking of my own experience and when I was in special class and when there were children with ASD in the classes that I was in. And as I wrote it out, this would be the same whether you're in an Irish medium school or not. You know, these things don't change too much just because you're in an Irish medium school. So communication first and foremost between parents, SNAs, teachers, outside agencies, that collaboration and open communication, you know, is so important, and it's so huge for the child. The second point I have, and that probably should be the most important point and should be in the middle, is place the child's needs first. You know, we're all working for that child, for them to reach their greatest potential, regardless of what their goals are, what their level of language is. Their needs come first, and everything else comes after that. Motivate them. You know, some might not be interested in grammar. If they're doing grammar maybe up in 5th and 6th class, they might not be motivated. They don't see the point in it. If it's necessary to do, there are ways to provide extra motivation. You know, find the interests that they like, and once that interest is there, whether it's a character from a TV show, could be their favorite color, and a lot of time that will motivate them to do something. Okay, create positive relationships with the child as you would with any child in any class. Give choices. For example, sometimes they might not be too interested in writing, might not want to be motivated to write. And, you know, you can give a choice. Today you can choose to write in your copybook, or you can type on the computer. You know, give the choices. And as well, very important, be flexible. We need to be flexible because a lot of the time the children can't be flexible. So we need to be flexible for them there. Now I'll just run across to the last one, I think. Just ceann bheag le hí muointe na Gaeltachta, má tá aon duine anseo. Mar dúirt mar hana, tá scoil áitiúil tábhachtach mar dúntar cóide áitiúla, agus tá sé sin an tábhachtach. Agus má tá gúsa teanga bháin le do chus gasúd eile, tá an tábhachtach an teanga sin úsáid le do fáiste le uathachas. Mar déiteach siad cohann se Gael láide cluine agus dánoch siad go bhfuil tú láir teanga difriúil leis na gasar eile, agus mar dúirs man agus seo a chuinnig mise go mór san Ghaeltacht le gasar le ASD, mór láiríonn de fáiste le ASD Gaeilge gúnaí, tá seansá go bhfuil tuiscint acu ar a bhfuil ára. So béis nach bhfuil se dá láir taráis leat ach tuigeann siad choileáin bil. Agus sin é, agus if anyone would ever like to, contact me for any more information or anything like that, my email address is there. Okay, Gurmahagate.
Gurmahagate Brenda. Agus nish on Kaintar Derna, our last panelist this evening, I'll ask Mhaoilchiaráin Cronin to come on. Gurmahagate the warrior.
Okay, I'm just trying to see now, can I get to my slide? Apologies. Okay, so I think I've skipped one ahead there. So good evening, everybody. Firstly, I'd like to just introduce myself. So as you're aware, I'm Mhaoilchiaráin Cronin and I'm the SEN coordinator in the Gaelscoil in lán-Ghaeilge, Gaelscoil Mhíchíl, Choláin, and Carmel, Airt, who spoke there, was my former principal and gave me my first job in my Gaelscoil. So I was very grateful to start my work there. So I worked in the mainstream setting for a number of years before moving to learning support and resource. And I suppose when I was in learning support and resource, I worked with many children with different needs and became very interested on how to support them. And also, I suppose I felt that we were supporting children, but parents of children with needs need a lot of support as well. And I mean that very respectfully, because I think often whatever diagnosis a child may get, they're handed a report. People can be handed a report and can be quite clinical in relation to your child. And often the services that you expect will be there on receipt of that report don't come to pass. And that can be very difficult and very challenging because you don't find the supports that you think are going to be there. So I suppose as I was in learning support, and Carmel would have mentioned this earlier, awareness of autism was very much coming to the fore. And as the years passed and the school grew in number, and I suppose developed, so did the number of children that would have been coming into the school that were presenting with autism. So in 2011, we opened our first special class for children with a diagnosis of autism. And today we do have 4 special classes. And they have, I would always say, added hugely to our school. And I will say that the children in our mainstream section of the school have such an appreciation of need and of additional needs. And that has been, I suppose, a fantastic thing to see because, they embrace the children and they don't see it as a challenge and they understand. And I think it's going to be great for them going forward that they will be our future generation who will be there to support children who do have needs. The second slide there, if we take a look at it, I suppose I'd like to take a look at younger children starting school. And that was one of the questions that was brought to our attention there. And I suppose many young children start school with a diagnosis of autism. But in my own experience over the years, there are many children who start school who don't have a diagnosis. And it can become apparent quite quickly that there may be needs and challenges for the child that may be indicative of autism. Now, these children may already have siblings in the school and may just have transitioned into school. And, they may not have an option to transfer and it doesn't suit the family situation. So when children are there, we need to be sure that we can support them and support the family. So I suppose it's important to remember that there is no one type of autism. And we have children who are in our special classes, but we also have children in our mainstream classes. And with autism, we know that it refers to a broad range of conditions characterized by challenges with social interaction, social communication, and by restricted or repetitive patterns of thought or behavior. So I suppose while communication and language are often commonly associated with autism, many children have significant strengths in these areas, and it is more how they interpret language that is the challenge for them. So a Gaelscoil may not be, you know, a BOC, I suppose, a restrictive measure in that sense, because some children have extra strengths in those areas as well. And I think, you know, we can focus on we'll say the challenges of communication, but they can also be a strength for children. So I suppose just moving on there to commerce order communication. So I'm actually going to take a slightly different slant on this. So you're after jumping ahead there again, would have been the next point on my slide. So when we talk about communication, I think it's very important that communication between home and school is, you know, prioritized. And I suppose when we talk about that, we're talking about parents that, like I said, receive reports, are on waiting lists, maybe for assessment. And when that report comes, it can be quite clinical. So school staff probably know your child better than anyone else outside the family. And often we find ourselves as the primary support for parents. I can see loads of pictures flashing up here now in front of me, and I suppose I'm trying to work on where I am, and I have some notes as well. So if you'll bear with me on that. So I suppose it's essential to establish positive lines of communication so that we can support parents and support the children and give people opportunities to discuss and the needs and indeed the successes that the children have in school. So as I mentioned earlier, there are also a number of children who start school without a diagnosis, but who may come quickly to the attention of the class teacher. For these children and families, there is a journey ahead of them and they will be in school. So it's very important that we can support those children. When we talk about support for child with autism is essential and dependent on their needs. And those needs, the needs of the children, must be a priority and must always come first. So it's important to review them regularly as the child is going forward in school. So I suppose looking back, an application for resources, resource teaching hours and access to SNA support had to be applied for. But since the new model regarding SEN was introduced with the circular in 2017, this has changed. And I believe that this has really, really benefited schools because we are allowed to give children who have the greatest level of need, the greatest level of support. And I suppose I'm going to refer there to something that Carmel would have mentioned earlier as well, that the whole area of SEN is quite new. It's not as old as we think, and it hasn't been there forever. And I suppose I can remember as well when you know, our first resource teacher started in the school, and it was quite a new sort of an experience for everybody because there was a bit of finding your way and how to manage this. So I suppose while there has been significant and welcomed and much needed improvements and progress, this also leads to many challenges. So while schools have embraced SEN teaching and special classes, there are often not adequate supports available for the children with more challenging needs or for school staff tasked with managing those needs, particularly if they are behavioural. So many of the outside services are not readily available to step in and provide support. A lot of the local service providers offer a home-based service and may not come into school. So those that do often provide a sort of a consultative type approach. And, you know, with all due respect, this can be hugely challenging for teachers because teachers are educators. They're not OTs, they're not speech and language therapists, and they're not psychologists. And I suppose I have to say, like, there are fantastic supports from the SESS, and Brenda would have mentioned, you know, a variety of courses as well. But I suppose the reality of the situation is if you start in a class with particularly a special needs classroom, and you're starting from the start, you may be waiting months for the course that you're looking for. So you are depending on the support of others within the school. And I suppose the other thing is a lot of the courses can be difficult to access and you may have waiting lists. And then there's the, you know, additional, I suppose, challenge of finding teachers, substitute teachers to take classes to allow people to attend courses. So I suppose I'm just going to move on because I'm sort of conscious of time, but I was also, when I suppose I heard about the course, looking to maybe give a little bit of information on the questions that were there. So I suppose when I moved to the side where we ask if an Irish medium school is the best fit for a child on the spectrum, there are a number of areas that I would like you to maybe think about. So I think we might be slide ahead, but I have there on my first bar, you will see the word equal footing. And you might ask, what do I mean by equal footing? So I suppose in a Gaelscoil or an Irish medium school, all children who start in a junior infant class in an Irish medium school start at the same level. Language and communication both focus on the learning of a new language, so many children who may be aware of their needs don't feel at a disadvantage, as everybody is learning and on the same rung of the ladder together. I suppose on the second bar there, you can see that language is taught. So Gaeilge may be new for the majority of children. So regardless of needs, the language is being taught to all the children from the same starting point. And I suppose this is something that I think is hugely important there on the third bar, that we're looking at the language of social interaction. And when we're talking about the language of social interaction, we're talking about one of the needs of children with autism. And in a Gaelscoil or Scoil lán-Ghaeilge, you are teaching the specific language needed for social interaction in the classroom, interaction with their peers, and also the language of play in the yard. And I mean, we don't take for granted that children are going to have these things. And that is hugely significant because it allows the children to feel that they're all starting on the same page, regardless maybe of the needs that they may have. And I suppose down there, I've also written in diverse needs. So I suppose when we're looking at diverse needs, children have different needs, but we also have teachers who are very capable. And within Gaelscoil, when you're teaching language, you use different methodologies to do so. You have your ranta, but you also have facial expression. You also have gesture. You also have your gachi and all those techniques that we use in Gaelscoil to get the meaning and communicate what we want to teach. And I suppose this is a significant benefit to children who may have challenges and difficulties in reading social cues and social interaction. So I suppose I'm going to move down there now to my next slide. And on that one, I suppose I was looking at how to get a child to focus and engage in subjects they may have no interest in. And I know that Brenda would have mentioned a bit on this as well. So I suppose these are things as well that a lot of people would look at and say, oh, should we all know the visual schedule? But I suppose, you know, who, when we think about it, would like to be somewhere for the day and not know what's happening or what's coming next? The same way as we're here tonight and we introduced, we all know what the plan was for the night. And that's very important for children to know as well. So that can be done within, you know, a classroom. It can be a full classroom timetable, or it can be, you know, for the children who are better able to cope. You can move, you know, put something on their desk. I suppose the second thing I would say there is fail to prepare, prepare to fail. We need to plan, and effective planning to meet the needs of the children. The first thing, now I know this is another sort of a cliche term, but I suppose it is very important for children who may be very much on their own agenda that we have a means and a method of redirecting them. The next one I have there is meet the needs of the child. Be realistic as to what they can achieve. So when I say that it's respectful to the child, we meet their needs. We don't try and put an extra burden on those. If a child can work and they can work and achieve at their own level, then that's better than them being upset or underachieving. Again, Brenda would have mentioned this, incorporate their strengths. If you're looking at Beg Muna, Spruckle or tricky words or something that you want to do at home, if they like dinosaurs, stick them on back of pictures of dinosaurs, and you'll see very quickly that they can, you know, benefit from these sorts of things. Modify the task. So I suppose if they don't like a subject area, Why not get them recording a piece of reading? Why not get them typing, get them to draw, you know, try and work on their strengths and modify the task. All children don't have to be doing the same thing. Pre-teach subject areas that they don't like. SET teachers are there. And we are talking about supporting children. So if we can pre-teach subject areas that we know are going to be a challenge for those children, then we can make that classroom experience more beneficial for them, but they're also more at ease and maybe may at times feel if they have an added fact going into the classroom that they can say, bonjour, guess what, is the gum? Then that's a huge benefit and boost to their confidence and to their self-esteem. And I suppose my big thing down there at the bottom is praise and reward, reward, reward. If you can get that child with you on day one and you can reward and reward, you will reap the benefits of that. And I suppose you can over-reward, but at the same time, you can always scale back. I'm going to skip quickly because I know that Claudia there wants that the time is coming up. So I might just skip quickly to the last slide that I have, please. And I suppose this one there is just how to help a child with anger outbursts in the classroom. And this in the classroom or even at home if you're a parent. You know, I think it's very important, know your child. Learn as much as you can about them, gather your information from preschool, from people that work with the child, from former teachers and from parents. The more you know about the child, the more you can meet their needs. Know their triggers. Find out what may set them off. Is it language? Is it sounds? You know, is it interactions? And then you need to prepare for those outbursts. So you need to have plans in place. There's no point in, as Carmel would say there, being reactive. We need to be, you know, one step ahead here. So if you know that that child may get very upset if, you know, during a PE lesson, you need to plan how you're going to manage that. And you need to plan your own reaction to model positive reactions for the child. So you need to be prepared. And that can also, you know, be there for parents. It's a very important thing to plan ahead. And I suppose the other thing I have there is be fair. I suppose I was working with a psychologist actually recently, and you know, we were talking about putting in place reward systems or whatever. And one thing, you know, that she mentioned, and it is true, if you are rewarding a child and they get a reward by tokens or building tokens or whatever, let that be there. If there's an outburst, deal with that separately. You can't you can't take away a child's reward if they have earned it fairly. And just sometimes I think we may look at things like that and say, oh, you can't have that iPad because you did. If they have earned time on the iPad, then that should be there because they worked for it. So just be, I suppose, mindful of that. And I suppose the other thing then is teach coping mechanisms. It's very important. That can be done within the SET classroom. And it can work successfully. You won't reap the benefits for a while, but I've seen over the years that when you keep chipping at that block and you keep working on it, it does work. And I suppose the other thing is, be it for homework, be it for school, have what I call a toolkit or a toolbox. That is your bag of tricks that if there is an issue and you don't have an SNA in your classroom, it's your go-to where you can say, you know, come on way down here. And you know the child likes these and they get their time out. So I suppose, I hope these have been somewhat helpful. And I'm, like I said, sort of conscious of time and ran through that a bit, but you know, I'm more than happy to share any other information if needs be at a later stage. So apologies about the slides. I'm not sure why it wouldn't work properly for me, and Mhíchíl.
So unfortunately we've come to the end of our session now. We have run out of time, so we're not going to be able to look at any of the questions. However, I do feel that most, if not all, of the questions have been covered in the very comprehensive presentations by our panelists this evening. Just to quickly mention, I do know that Brenda did briefly touch on the topic of Down syndrome there, so but I do know that there have been a number of questions sent in relation to that. So we do intend to look at that as a further area of interest for us, that we'd be able to provide some resources and possibly with a view to doing a webinar in the future with that. So I'd like to also from Mhaoilchiaráin le Carmel, le Celine, le Brenda, agus le Mhuire, to our panelists this evening for such amazing presentations. The depth of knowledge and I suppose the passion felt in all of those presentations has been outstanding. I'm going to quickly just ask Carmel to come in, because I know there's been many questions in relation to the transfer to second level. So I know Carmel just has indicated that she'd like to just maybe mention just a sentence or two there on that, because I do know there was a number of people who were asking about that. So Carmel, multiple just lame stock and chin. Thought they were mute and chin.
Keeping me muted is a very good idea normally. However, there was a question, and I can feel the stress from the person who asked the question with regard to their child moving to second level and whether the child would continue through in an all-Irish setting or should move to an English medium setting. If your child has succeeded in an all-Irish setting at primary level, then I suppose you need to ask yourself, why do you think your child won't succeed at second level? If Irish hasn't been an issue up to 6th class, you need to ask yourself, why should it be an issue from there on in? So I will go back to what I already said, the indicators of good practice, because good practice will always have to underpin any decision you make. The indicators of good practice, the team-based approach, the cooperation between teachers, the cooperation between teachers and parents are the indicators, the most important indicators as to whether your child should go to Scoil A or Scoil B or Scoil C. It has never and should never be based on the language. Sinile, Gurmila Mahagath.
Gurmila Mahagath, Sin at Carmel. So Gána Hill and Mhuire, and all I have left to do then is to thank Lán, Ciara and Peggy from Ghaeltachas and from all staff members and the board as well for all of the work done in preparing this, from advertising to organising speakers to doing all the tech support with Thomas Harvey and so we hope for you as parents in the audience that these questions have gone some way to allay fears, answer questions and provide some support for you. Just to say that, and I see Ciara has shared there in the chat box in relation to resources that we do have, feel free to go to our website at any stage, gaeltachas.com, and you will see our .ie, I'm confused at this point, .ie Mhaoilchiaráin, and there's a wide range of resources up there to support in all areas of additional needs. So, Mhaoilchiaráin Steve, Father Hishmahori, agus a Forja, and a Fanail, agus Mhuire agus uathachas.
I'm just going to jump in there and on your behalf to thank Clodagh for sharing this seminar. And not only that, Clodagh works behind the scenes, pulling all this together, putting advice together and recommending people and resources for parents and for schools. So we're very, very grateful to Clodagh for that. And yeah, just to reiterate what Clodagh said, I think there was such positive encouragement in all of those presentations, and it was all grounded in such really, really practical and useful advice. So we're very, very grateful to Lug us and Banel. And yep, as Ciara is very efficiently adding information there in the chat box on our resources, and we have newsletters dedicated to additional learning needs, newsletters for parents as well. So we'd very much welcome yours joining us in using those resources. And if there are other seminars that you think would be of use, or any other follow-up on this seminar or anything in this area, we'd love to hear from you, because we would really like to expand our expertise and our resources and our supports and help you as much as we can. So Gurmila Maghi ar fad.